AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. John, as those of you who are watching this can see, is not here today. For the past few weeks, we've been doing UAW strike all the time. This time we're not going to do UAW strike, but in case anybody's wondering, Ford just had a press conference talking about Kentucky Truck being taken down. And needless to say, they're rather upset about that. But we're going to do something different. We're going to have four of the smartest people that I know in this industry talk primarily about Tesla. So Sean, let's bring them all in. Okay, look at that screen. It's just full of people. So Greg Migliore, the editor-in-chief of Autoblog, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see everybody here.
Okay. We've got Sebastian Blanco. Last time you were on the show, you were freelance. Now you're the editor-in-chief of Automotive Engineering International. So congratulations on the job and welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
We've got Stephanie Brinley, who's the Associate Director of Auto Intelligence at S&P Global Mobility. Steph, thanks for coming back.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
And last but not least, we have Brett Smith, independent researcher who's been studying this industry for longer than the rest of us will admit. So, okay. So the theme of this show is, can anybody in the U.S. take on Tesla? Now, every time it seemed that there would be a new vehicle coming out that was an EV, they'd say, oh, it's a Tesla beater. I would maintain that, like, nobody can really beat them, but taking them on is the issue. So, let's do a quick round the horn here. Do you think anybody can do it? Greg?
So I think an area of opportunity is actually in trucks. The Cybertruck has faced some challenges actually, going from concept to production. Some of the different things like, the shatterproof sort of glass, may or may not be, real things. And then we've seen, the Detroit 3 and some other challengers like Rivian, really step up with some very credible products. I think it's going to be interesting to see, how consumers, react to this. Where's their brand loyalty going to lay? Are you going to be like, maybe you're electric first, and that maybe means Tesla? Perhaps you're, Chevy or Ford first, and that means maybe you want to steer towards like the Silverado EV or, the Lightning. So I actually think, no surprise, trucks are where the Detroit 3 can make some inroads. And then you've got guys like Rivian, I think in particular, with the R1S and the R1T, they could kind of, do like a side sort of movement as well. So that's how I think it's going to take place right now. That's where it seems like if Tesla has a vulnerable flank, I think it's more on the trucks and SUVs.
Sebastian?
I absolutely think someone can take on Tesla. They've been trying, like you said. We've heard the various adjectives for different, especially the higher end sports cars that whatever BMW or Mercedes released in the last few years always had a Tesla beating angle to them when they came out. I don't see that as much anymore, but I think that's because the companies aren't saying we're going to attack the Model S or we're going to go after, this particular high-end market. The amount of investment that we see across the industry proves that they're both willing and I believe able to take on Tesla. It just, in the US especially, they have such a lead, but that can't last forever. I don't believe that will.
Forever is a long time.
Exactly.
Steph?
Forever is a very long time. Didn't we, right, somewhere in the last couple of days, the fact that GM used to have 50% US market share came up. So, that wasn't forever ago, was it? It was just 60 years or so. There's opportunity for somebody to take on Tesla. I think what we really need to remember here is we're talking about a transformation of the industry as a whole. It's not just about electric. It's about converting ICE buyers into electric buyers. And that's going to take more than one brand. It's going to take more than one attitude. It's going to take more than one company. So I think that other companies will be able to. The question really that we're seeing is it's not going to happen quickly. It's not going to be in 2024 that you're suddenly going to go, whoa, this other XYZ company in the US is is really taking all of Tesla's share. And we really do see, I mean, Tesla can dominate the EV side of the market for a good another decade. So even as we have other automakers coming in with really credible product, with product that consumers like, when they finally get all of the production stuff down and they get the inventory where they want it, it doesn't mean that Tesla will not still be the leader in the segment. Tesla may still be the leader. They just won't be alone anymore.
Brett.
What she said.
That's convenient.
With a couple of caveats, and I think absolutely I agree. Stephanie was just really articulate and thoughtful on that. I've heard John and you a couple times over the last month or so on Autoline After Hours talking about the strike and the challenges with that. This is an incredibly transformational time in this industry. And for the foreseeable future, is that 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? I don't know. Tesla's just going to run roughshod over the competition. Mm-hmm. It's going to be really hard for these companies to get this right. As you, Gary, pointed out at the beginning, how many times have we heard someone say, hey, this is the Tesla beater? It ain't out there yet. It's going to be tough for these companies. They're learning a whole new business. I used to say back in the early days of Tesla, when I would do interviews and such on media, I'd say, that they're great for the industry because they're showing first how hard it is to be a car company, but they're also showing how you can really push the envelope and be creative. And I think all of these companies, after 10 years, 12 years, are still trying to figure that out. Then we can talk about the consumers later, but just that transformation right now is so difficult for these companies.
But it seems to me, okay, so you're talking about like this is going to take a long time. Okay, but it's not like they started last week. I mean, this has been something that's been going on for a decade. And why hasn't there been a credible response to this?
Because I think maybe the first couple of years their heart wasn't fully into it.
Yeah. Totally.
You had sort of efforts on paper that sounded like they would be okay, but and about 2019, 2020, the tone changed. It changed from how do I support ICE and figure out how to do a BEV to, okay, we're going to do the BEV. And the ICE is going to suffer. But that conversation within OEMs and where they're going to put their money and how they're going to budget things didn't really start to totally shift until 2020. Give or take. Up until then, it was like, how do we balance and how do we make sure we do everything? And it shifted for a number, not everybody, but it shifted for a number about that time. And that was only 4 years ago. So we're still early days. Transformation in the auto industry can't take 5 years. It's going to take 25 because cars take 4 to 5 years to develop and they're on the road for 15.
Stephanie, do these car companies have 20 years to make it?
Yes. And not every single company can, but I'm not going to call who's going to survive the next 5 years and who's going to go under. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But
Sebastian, you do that.
Yeah, you can do that, Sebastian. I'll let you do that. I'll sit back and watch you do that, I should say. But yeah, I don't think this is not a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean that everyone will survive equally. It doesn't mean that every company maintains the status that they have today. It may mean things that change, but it's not quite a zero-sum game. And certainly some automakers have much more risk and have much more vulnerability than others do. But not everyone needs to fall away to 20 million units of Tesla a year. that seems highly unlikely.
On the point of something changing recently, my question for the group, because I can't think of a recent time when we really thought of a new EV as a compliance car, something we certainly heard many, many times in the 2010s from many, many automakers. Like you said, that isn't quite the mentality anymore of these. Well, we need to for the credits, we need to hit our CAFE standards, whatever it was at the different times, or to have something to placate our customers. Now you're right. It's like, okay, fine. We'll design a whole new platform. We'll make whole new deals with different battery partners. We'll do all this new technology that can take advantage of this new platform. And then our new cars will come out. And some of those are here. Some of those are still coming. But Tesla's been around, what are we at here? 20-ish years now. but the real fight has only just started. I agree.
All right. So Sebastian, clarify this for me. So basically what you're saying is that for a number of years, the traditional OEMs half-assed their efforts on EVs.
Some of them did for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And now they're saying we're going to do it. Okay. So if I'm a consumer and I say to myself, well, wait a minute, they had all those, those crappy cars before. Why should I believe they have a good one now?
Fair question. I would think that anybody who is still trying to answer that right now knows enough about the history to know these things. If you're just coming into it with where, you didn't think about an EV, you don't even know the term compliance car, you're just going shopping right now. I don't think that's part of the conversation. You might know that someone had an EV, but all you know is, oh, now my neighbor has one and I want to get one. I don't think that history is going to negatively affect new buyers, and the people who know that there was such a thing as a compliance car should also know that that doesn't exist anymore.
Here's a thought. So Kia yesterday talked about their EV9 pricing. It's not cheap, right? You expected it wasn't going to be inexpensive. You expect it was going to be up there. And as I was looking at it, I don't have the full answer to the question, but so there's two layers to it. On one hand, great, you've got a 3-row full-size family SUV for a segment that tends to be a little bit more cognizant of how much things cost. You've got the Kia Telluride that goes from $35,000 to about $55,000, and you've got this thing that starts just above Telluride. Are they going to run into an issue where even if somebody wants an EV of that size, they go, 80 grand for a Kia? 75? Okay, it's an electric, so maybe it should be more expensive, but even if they can afford it, are they going to have the faith in the brand to put that much money into it? And I feel like we might see a number of brands run into that. We've seen brands run into that on ICE products for decades. Brands have tried to push past a price point that the consumers are willing to take. And some of them have been able to push through and make it work, and some of them haven't, at least for that product. Now, the companies have gone down, but those products haven't necessarily worked they wanted. And I think that looking at that EV9 pricing and kind of comparing it to Telluride, understanding that electrics are more expensive, even that does open another whole other level. A Mercedes-Benz can charge this. Can a Kia get like up there, and are consumers willing and ready to spend that kind of money? We'll see.
And I would take it further. Sebastian, you talked about compliance cars. You're right. I think they're now trying to find aspirational cars. They're trying to find cars that consumers want to step out and buy. And there are a couple examples. But are there examples that really show us that they can do this, to Stephanie's point, where there's going to be, even probably with incentives, there's going to be a difference in pricing for a while, and a difference in performance in some important characteristics, and others maybe not as important. Have we got to the point where they're not making compliance cars, but are they making aspirational electric vehicles for the broader market yet?
So what do you think, Greg?
I think an area like some of the legacy automakers in particular can kind of make up ground and maybe charge what some of these EVs are worth is through design. If you look at some of the new Chevys, like the Blazer looks outstanding, the EV, the Silverado, very attractive, and I think you get people actually seeing the products and they say, well, okay, do I want to pay 30, 50, whatever $1,000 for a Chevy? Then they find out, well, hey, it's electric, and hey, this is what the interior looks like. And I think you could definitely, again, make up some ground. You're seeing some of the challenger brands too, like Fisker, Lucid, et cetera. How many, design awards did the Lucid Air win when it rolled out? Like, everybody was drooling over that thing. And then we saw the price and you're like, wow, wait, here's this company that you've never heard of, and they're charging 6 figures for it. Okay. And then you get inside the car and you're like, okay, yeah, this is really quite something. And I think that's an area that they can try to make up some ground. You saw it a little bit, I think, with the EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5. People really were into those cars. And I think it made more consumers think, well, do I want to spend this much money on a Hyundai? That's a long existential question. But when you say it's electric and it looks like this 1980 something concept, yeah, you get more people into the party.
Yeah.
So okay, here's something that shocked me. I sent you all yesterday some numbers that were the first 6 months of the year. Kelley Blue Book came out with numbers through Q3 today, so you guys haven't heard these numbers yet. Okay, Tesla sales, okay, in the United States through the third quarter were 493,513 vehicles sold in the United States. In second place, Chevy, 49,531. Okay. So basically it's like a factor increase. And so, one of the headlines from Cox Automotive, who, put this thing together, was that Tesla now only has the aforementioned 50% of the market. Okay. But the market has gotten bigger. But, Brett, you've studied manufacturing a lot. All of these companies that have, 50,000, 30,000, 20,000 sales, where are the economies of scale?
Scale isn't there, and it won't be for a long time. Obviously, GM loves to talk about the Ultium platform, and there's some real value in that. But yeah, these vehicles are low volume. And Gary, I remember our friend John McElroy and myself sitting in the Milan Correctional Institution visiting a friend 5 years ago. John talking about by 23, 24, there's going to be this bloodletting of vehicles because there's going to be so many models out there, and there's going to be relatively few buyers, and nobody's going to get that scale. And I think John's had it right on almost to the date when he talked about 24 model year, where we're getting to a point where, as Sebastian pointed out, they're no longer compliance vehicles. There's some really exciting stuff, and there's lots of them, but none of them are at volume except for Tesla. And really, Tesla is getting all their volume from the Model 3 platform, and they're crushing it with that. And for these companies that have based their existence on volume and scale, that's a long, murky middle to get through.
It is a long, murky middle. When you look at a traditional sort of innovation chart, you're still in the innovative buyer stage until about 13%. You don't actually get into kind of the first wave of early buyers until you're at 30, 35%. We are still at 7% EV market share. So we haven't gotten to the mainstream buyer yet. Yeah, there are more and more products that are coming that will fill that need, and price points are varied. I mean, I brought up the EV9 as being expensive, but there's price points all over the place. If you want pure EV, you can find a way to get it, and you can get it in a bunch of different packages right now. But we haven't come close, really. And there's a gap between that 13% and getting to that 34% that is very difficult in any industry to jump. And we still haven't done that yet. And that is this murky middle that we're talking about from 24 probably to 27. We put together numbers, and in 27, I think it was 26, I've got a peak sort of model count, and I'm looking at by propulsion system. So Kona and Kona EV is 2, right? We're about 630 different vehicles you can choose from in about 2026. That's more than the U.S. buyer.
Okay, so you're saying there'll be that many vehicles that are electric vehicles, or that many vehicles across the board?
Total. And I did this count splitting out electric and ICE propulsion, so that, because right now people are thinking about them a little bit differently, and we aren't yet. We will be, but we are not yet at the stage where it behaves like hybrid, in that it's just a Camry. Do you buy a hybrid or non-hybrid Camry? We're not quite there yet. We will ultimately, and for some of these things, it might shift a little bit like that. Kona right now, Hyundai Kona could kind of be that way right now, because you can get an EV Kona or a regular Kona. So I counted those separately. So anyway, but we've got about 630 in that year, and we'll see a peak, and we will see things come down. We will see some ICE vehicles go away. We will see some consolidation within nameplates, within model ranges. It won't stay there, but we're going to have a really ugly couple of years in terms of what Brett says, scale, and in terms of marketing, and in terms of helping consumers understand what's really out there. I mean, we have to remember, a lot of people just come in and, pop in, buy a car every 5 or 6 years, pop back out. They're not keeping up with all of this stuff. And if they pop back in and there's 600 things to choose from, they're not necessarily going to do the in-depth research and some of the quick answers.
Yeah.
before they
But-
end
okay,
up.
Okay, but if
listen to
you're buying an EV, okay, isn't the first thing you're going to think about is, oh, Tesla's EV. I'll buy a Tesla, and they'll
That's
continue.
positive for some people and it's negative for others.
Right.
There's no brand
More
in
and
the
more.
world that's positive for everyone. So I think it cuts both ways for Tesla. For some people, it's absolutely a positive, and for some, they don't want a Tesla.
You know, I
I
think
think
Tesla is still in that kind of ubiquitous state right now where they're like where the Prius was 15, 20
Yeah.
years ago, where when you think hybrid, you think Prius. When you think electric, you think Tesla. Now, I think a couple of you guys were saying there, it's getting to be a little bit more of a controversial proposition. You know, some people, based on like what Elon Musk has done just throughout his life and the way he's run Tesla, people are taking different approaches to that. There's, people who have different positions on electric cars. So it's interesting. The brand has never been more, ubiquitous, never more transcendent, but it's also probably never been more controversial.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's going to impact sales. I mean, because, as you were mentioning there, Gary, they're head and shoulders above everybody else. They have this like 1961, hegemony like GM did. But, we'll see. That could change.
Well, so it's interesting. So, Greg, your colleagues over at Yahoo Finance did a survey of electric vehicle intenders and possible buyers, and this poll was taken September 29th through October 1st. So it's really fresh, and talking about who people think of, and the company that came in number one as people were thinking about buying an electric vehicle was Toyota at 30%. Tesla came in second at 23%. Honda third at 20%. GM fourth at 15%, and Ford at 14%. Okay, so basically, let's see how many electric vehicles has Toyota sold through October or through the third quarter?
I think maybe they've sold like 3x49 number of cars.
Well, it was a little better than that, Sebastian.
I was just trying to make a joke about the terrible
I know.
naming.
Yes. So they sold 6,500. Let's see.
But this is the power brand, because the question isn't what EVs are out there, because you're asking somebody who doesn't necessarily know. The question is, who would you buy an EV from? They answered the brand that they like and that they know and they already trust. That's not the question of what's available. That's slightly different.
So how do the people at General Motors feel about being at 15%, half of what Toyota's number is?
They don't mind every time they sell a big Suburban.
And it's kind of mean if you ask, if you put it to GM when you've got multiple brands in there. I mean, none of those brands probably would have gotten over the 15. So I'm not saying it would have suddenly changed it, but at the same time, that's a different question. Toyota is a brand versus Chevrolet is a brand. Toyota is a brand versus GM is a brand. GM is not a brand. It's a company. So I'm not sure, how they
Ford is a brand to any company, and it only came in at 14.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm not saying that it means that it would make Chevrolet rank higher than GM ranked, but I do think there's a little bit of awkwardness in the way that is phrased. But I don't know if the data was, if they just combined the GM brands and just put it that way, or what they did. So who knows?
Well, on one hand, this kind of hints at a larger, perhaps, answer to the overall question, if anyone can take on Tesla. Obviously, this muddy area, this muddy few years that Stephanie was mentioning, that we're all kind of talking about before we get to, either the all EV lineup of, 15 years from now or something approaching that, when what's the right way to say it? It's like, as these things shake out, is the auto industry when it's all electric really that different than the auto industry when it's all ICE, other than there may be some new players? Or will people still go back to, I like this brand, I like the Bronco or the Mustang or whatever, and now there's an electric version or whatever model they happen to have an affinity for? The shakeout period will be rough, but when we get to the point where people then can actually choose between these brands, I think that stuff will become more important, and that Toyota at 30% will be like, oh, now we can capitalize. Even though right now, what are you going to buy from a Toyota that's an EV?
So Sebastian, are you basically saying that with the exception of a Rivian or a Lucid or somebody that drops in around the margins, that pretty much the auto industry will be the same?
I don't think the same. I can see it. I can see customers approaching it the same way. There may be different, like obviously Tesla is going to be there that wasn't there 50 years ago when GM had half the sales in the country. But the idea of how consumers go to the store, go to the dealership or try to buy their cars. Okay, now you can do it online, but you still have some sort of, this thing that Stephanie mentioned, where you don't pay attention for a long number of years, then you just see what's available, get what you think is the best one, and then you're out of the market for another couple of years. That's going to be the same, I think, whether it's EVs or ICEs, unless we really shift into a mobility, car sharing type of world, which may affect, may work in some places, but I don't think will be everywhere, in the near future at all. So I think the general attitudes and the way people shop and the way that these other brands can remain relevant will kind of be the same as it was, no matter what the powertrains are.
So Brett, what I was suggesting to Sebastian, that the auto industry might be the same, you shook your head no. And as a person who listens to the podcast, our listeners don't know that you were shaking your head no. So I want to know what you were thinking.
Yes, in fact, I listen to it. I don't watch it. So I think, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, Gary. I think we are in a remarkably transformational time. I think Sebastian, to an extent, is right. It's going to be an industry. We're going to build cars. People will buy cars. But how we do it, who does it, and maybe even who sells them is going to probably be different than we are now. A lot different, maybe. And I think that for decades, I've been involved in this industry, 35 years. We talk about a transition, and the end point is great, but we forget sometimes when we talk about that big picture about the pain that goes with that transformation and the opportunity that goes with it. And over the next decade or so, we're going to see some enormous pain in this industry. I think Mr. Fain is talking and worried about that pain right now, as are every vehicle manufacturer CEO in the business. And I think, yes, we will probably have cars for sale for individual use. I don't think we're not going to talk about connected automated vehicles right now. We're probably going to be buying cars in a similar kind of mind think that we do now in 10 years. But that system, just from gigapresses or these ways that this industry is changing, change how we build them, change who builds them, who supplies parts. And that transformation from an automotive industry is just going to be gut-wrenching and incredibly opportunist.
All right. So add some specificity to what you mean by pain. Yeah. I mean, we throw words around like, oh, there's going to be pain. What does that mean? What does that look like?
There are going to be companies, I think, at every level that are drastically different in 5 and 10 years than they are now. Certainly on the first or the second and third tier supply bases, we know right now is going through this transition from ICE to EV already. Throw on top of that this last month's worth of labor strife, they're in trouble. You look at this bigger suppliers, they are transitioning. Scheffler is talking about the Tesco purchase this week. You see that kind of transition. Those affect not only the names on the companies, but the facilities down through the system. You look at all of these car companies right now that are building internal combustion engine cars and doing a wonderful job at it, but doing an electric vehicle, as we're seeing from each of them, is a different beast. And do they have that skill set? How are they going to get that skill set? And will the consumers wait until they get that skill set? Or maybe on the flip side, will they be able to delay a little bit and still build a whole lot of big trucks that they'll make profits off of? It's just a lot of fun. Yeah, they are. And that means that maybe they get a little less enthusiastic about government regulation from EPA going forward.
All right, so you guys all poo-pooed my sales advantage thing. So we're gonna take a quick break. Hear from our friends at Bridgestone. They're going to come back, and I want you guys to poo-poo what I think is the second advantage, which is Tesla's costing advantage. So we'll be back in a moment.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on what roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
Okay, and we are back. So earlier this year, Reuters, our friend Joe White, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, Reuters, they reported that Tesla, this goes back to Q3 2022, but they just figured this all out this year, that Tesla was making a gross profit per vehicle of $15,653, okay, which means little, if anything, until you know that General Motors was making $3,818 per vehicle and Ford $3,115 per vehicle. So we've seen Tesla changing prices in a way that is unprecedented in this industry. I mean, it always seems to me that, they printed up the stickers, they stuck them on the windows, and that was the price for a long time, right? So, but Tesla's able to say, we'll cut that 15 grand and we'll make less, and but we'll still be all right.
I think
So
Tesla's
how do you
making a
compete?
similar decision as other automakers have made it in the past. The dynamic's a little bit different for sure, but I mean, cutting the price and putting an incentive on the hood, kind of the same thing. You feel like you've got enough room to increase your scale by dropping your price. That's a tried and tested strategy. The Tesla does have more wiggle room to work with than the other automakers.
More?
Point. More? Yeah. It's
for those listening, I was
significant.
just making a very large thing.
Very much
And
more,
it is. And how that's going to play out over time is we're just going to have to watch. But I do watch Tesla sometimes and think, okay, you're doing things on a different scale and with a little bit of different attitude, but man, dropping prices to get more volume ain't nothing new. It is nothing new. They can use it with a different
Stephanie,
scalpel, but
Stephanie, can the others afford to do that? That's I mean, isn't that fundamentally the question? I mean, so we saw Ford responded and said, okay, we're going to cut the price of the Mach-E, right?
Yeah.
But can Ford
Can they afford,
as Brett would say, can they take the pain of that?
Right.
Can they afford not to?
That's the question, and I don't have the answer how which company can afford that pain and for how long they can afford that pain. But the scale isn't there yet, as we talked about. It's just not. It's not there for electric vehicles past Tesla right now. It will be, we think, at some point, and it's going to be difficult to go through. I don't know. I'm not going to, again, still going back to not saying who's going to win and who's going to lose. But the fundamental approach is not super. Is not super different. The scale and the impact of it is different. The flamboyance with which they can do it. The fact that Tesla's stock price seems to be quite related to the fact that they'll eventually have a car that drives itself and you just rent it to your neighbor and your neighbor then doesn't have a car, I guess. I don't know. But that's why these stock price is supposed to be so high, because then the owner can make some money off the car later. Like, all of that's very unproven yet. We're not even close to being able to do that. So Tesla can do some things now that who knows for how long it can. As this transformation happens, and when you finally get to that mainstream 34%, 35%, 36% of the market, will people behave a little bit differently? They may ask different questions. Tesla they're the darling right now, but man, nobody's the darling forever. We know that.
All right, Greg. So what do you see happening here in terms of this costing advantage? I mean, at Autoblog, as you guys are covering pricing as part of what you do, and are looking at green vehicles, all of which seem to be very expensive, except for these vehicles that are coming someday. I look at the Chevy number, which, as I said earlier, was number 2 in sales, and that comes down to the Bolt, and that was when the Bolt was like basically, a hot deal at like 28 grand, somewhere around there. And what did General Motors decide to do? Oh, that's right. Let's drop the Bolt. And they dropped the Bolt, and but we're going to bring it back. Yeah. If they're going to bring that back, I guarantee it's not going to be 28 grand. So what do you see?
It does seem like there is an opportunity during this transition. I know we've talked about sort of the pain that will be felt, but right now, the way I would look at it, if you're like one of the Detroit 3, or perhaps, like Mercedes, Volkswagen, et cetera, is you're sort of investing in your future. Sell the car at a loss, sell the electric car maybe at a very slim margin. You got to get those consumers into your showrooms or perhaps online in the future. thinking that you're an electric car maker too. Because right now, according to the study that we've been talking about, people think it's Tesla and Toyota, apparently. So you need to get those people in there thinking that you are an electric maker and a credible one. And I think that's where especially the Detroit 3 can win, is when you drive many of their EVs, they're very good. You know, the Bolt was a very solid car for the price. And I think that's what you do. You do have to sort of play the long game here. You got to get that showroom traffic, try to figure out ways to reach consumers and see where it goes. And I think that's also where you do get a little bit of it's an interesting tactic. I don't know if I would even call it an advantage right now, but the price swings of like the different Teslas, I mean, it's wild. It reminds me again, like Stephanie said, of, you know, different, like, you know, employee pricing for everybody, or like, here's the incentives on the hood. So, you know, it's a little kind of wild, for lack of a better way to put it. But I think it also, like, you know, it gives some uncertainty, and that's maybe where like some of the legacy automakers can sort of be the comforting place you could go and say, hey, this is how much the car costs, and go there.
Depend on us, we'll overcharge you.
Right. Well, agreeing with Greg on the investment and having to do that and having to get customers. The other part of that, to Brett would see too, is manufacturing and the technology. You can't. We've seen automakers try to just do an EV in 24 hours or give or take, right? You cannot develop this technology overnight. If an automaker is not going to explore it, is not going to invest in it, is not going to figure out how to do it, they're not going to catch up. That's the automaker that doesn't catch up. The automaker that's not playing in this and not really thinking and going, well, maybe it won't happen. None of them are doing that at this point, but that's who loses, because even if they lose money on these vehicles right now, they need to develop that technology and expertise, as well as bring their customers in. They need to figure out how to build it, and they're doing that, but it takes time.
Yeah, okay, Sebastian, we haven't heard from you on the costing advantage.
I haven't seen the numbers that you talked about there. I want to see that the things. Do you know, is the cost per vehicle, does that factor in other things that the companies make, like the EPA credits that Tesla was able to take advantage of, or is that like somehow pure? This is just what it costs us to make the car and what we're able to sell it for. Because Tesla's had many years of gaining money basically from the other automakers, taking their money because they weren't making EVs, and those things are going to go away. So if those are somehow wrapped into that that 15,000 figure or whatever it was, then that will dramatically change. I assume. I haven't paid as much attention to this since for a couple of years, shifting away from daily coverage. But anytime, you know, if Tesla's able to make that much profit off of, or extra money off of one EV, there's nothing that says Toyota or GM can't do that. I mean, they have the engineers, they have the teams, they have the resources, the R&D department to figure that out. And as we were saying, they're only recently getting serious. You know, we can look at Nissan and GM as some of the early people who were serious with the Leaf and the Bolt, you know, 10, 15 years ago, or Volt, excuse me, still one of the worst naming choices ever. But, you know, like if they want to catch up, I have some faith in these big OEMs that have been around for 100 years that they can figure that out. There's nothing that Tesla's doing, I don't think, on the manufacturing side that's that unique or different or special that someone else can't come in and copy it. They just invested and really worked on it. So, okay, they can make more money from an EV. Good for you. You know, take that and do something. But aside from this mess of a Cybertruck coming up, you know, what's next for Tesla? Is it the Roadster at some point? Like the future, I don't think looks super bright for Tesla, especially with other automakers coming in and saying, okay, let's play.
So when you say the future doesn't look super bright for Tesla, I mean, how far along is it that you're in this future where it's not as bright?
I mean, if you've had so much space for a long time to sort of compete by yourself, and all of a sudden you have real competition, I don't know. I guess by saying as bright, to have a tenfold, you know, advantage in sales numbers against your nearest competitor, I don't know. I would be very surprised if we still see that in 5 years. Let's put it that way.
And you think a traditional OEM will come to the fore?
I don't think another startup's going to do it. I think someone will be like, hey, look, if Tesla's able to make, you know, this much extra money off of an EV, hey, why don't we do that? And I don't know, like, don't you just think that the rest of the industry is also full of smart people? Like Tesla's not the only one who's like, yeah, we can do this. We're going to figure this out. Like competition seems to force people to be like, all right, we can do that too, and then beat you at some point.
Well, okay. So playing the devil's advocate here,
Sure.
let's say, for example, that Cadillac has lots of smart people, and I think Cadillac does have lots of smart people. Okay. So far, they've sold 5,300 Lyrics. Okay, 5,300 Lyrics, which is a very good car. I mean, it's but why is it so few?
Yeah,
Oh, come on.
Production issue, you know, and this is where it's interesting watching GM, because they haven't really talked much about production issues, but other than to say they exist. But they haven't gone through the pain. They haven't really gotten the production to the scale they want it to be at. The problem has, as I understand, is not so much that there's a bunch of Lyrics sitting around that they can't move, as they don't have Lyrics to move.
Exactly.
On the Mustang Mach-E, you've got more Mustang Mach-Es around, and those are slowing down. And I was in a totally separate meeting talking about this the other day, and said, hey, by the way, Mustang Mach-E is 4 years old now. Everything slows down in this fourth year, right? Other than Tesla Model 3 and Model Y, which don't have the production issues. So anyway, it's interesting. I think that GM is now, their brands are going to have a little bit of a struggle, because so much was promised, and because it's taking a little bit longer to get to where they want to. In that near-term pain, there is a little bit of that. Now, if somebody who wanted a Lyric yesterday and couldn't get one and couldn't wait and had to go buy something else, goes and buys something else, there is nothing to say that in 3 years they won't give Lyric another try. So it could still be temporary pain, even though the optics look kind of bad right now. And people aren't sure, because they say they're going to have these, and they're still really hard to find. But everything's hard to find.
Okay, to go back to Brett's pain point, though, in 3 years, you're gonna live that down, my friend.
I'm always the pain.
In 3 years from now, that person that didn't buy the Lyric, I mean, what's the likelihood they're going to say, "Oh, I'll try Cadillac again"?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, there's nothing fundamentally to say that they wouldn't. I can't guarantee they will or they won't. Nobody can. But if it was an availability issue, and not that they decided they thought it was ugly, or they decided it was whatever, if it was availability issue, there isn't really something that will stop them and that says you cannot. The only thing that would stop them is if they were absolutely in love with what they bought and they decided they didn't want to try Cadillac again because what they bought turned out to, knock their socks off even more than they thought the Cadillac would. That would stop them, or whatever. Or they're in a different life stage at that point, and when they go back, the Lyric doesn't fit for whatever it is that they want. There's reasons for them to not come back, but the availability in and of itself is probably not going to, it's not like, they didn't have it yesterday, so I'm never going to look at that brand again. I don't think that a majority of buyers will feel that way. Some might, but I think there's still space in there. And then there's others who, don't know it's there and aren't even looking for it. And in 3 years, they're going to open up their browser and go, what's here? And there's going to be a Cadillac Lyric that pops up, and they'll be like, hey, that's kind of cool. Why don't I take a look at it?
Stephanie, from what you say, it sounds like it's actually not there. There aren't very many out there.
There aren't very many out there, right?
So I want to go back to something Sebastian said that I think is interesting on the diversity of product. I mean, Tesla makes a couple of products, and they've done a phenomenal job getting scale off of those products. They've been the Model S, some will tell you, hasn't been redone in a long, long time. But they still sell them. The Model 3 is going through kind of a product change now. They still sell a lot of them. When we look at the traditionals, they're approaching this by saying we need to get several different models for each brand out there. Mm-hmm. And that creates complexity. It creates cost. It creates a lot of things based on how they've done things in the past. They have to do them going forward. Understandably, but it delays that opportunity to get the volume, to get a product out there in enough quantity that people know that product is there. And I think that old, very historically effective model plan is challenged right now in this transition, because you'll have those out there, but you don't. And going forward, you got to figure out how to get some volume out there. And is it volume at each brand, or is it one brand that really focuses on it, like Tesla's doing in one model?
It almost
So-
seems like playing different games. Like
Yeah.
you've got Tesla has like 3 or 4 cars. They're borderline iconic, dare I say. And then Chevy's like, we're going to sell you a dozen or half a dozen different ones. If you don't like these, come on over to Cadillac. And then we have
I got to say, Greg, the first model is a whole lot more cost effective than the second model. Whether it's better long term, we can talk about, but boy, for that near term, it's way more cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hugo,
let me throw another number out there. And this is, Stephanie, this is from your colleague, Tom Libby, who was looking at consumer loyalty. And so they look at brand loyalty. So within the luxury segment where they put Tesla, the loyalty to Tesla, meaning when somebody goes back into market to buy another vehicle, the loyalty is 68.5%.
Mm-hmm.
All other loyalty or all other
It's 15.
premium brands minus Tesla is at 44.9%. Okay. So people who own a Tesla buy a Tesla, and people who buy, I don't know, a Lyric may not buy another Lyric. I mean, again, this strikes me as being nearly insurmountable. And you all disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a boring world, so I have to disagree just because I don't want to only write about Teslas.
That all part of what impacts that too is like we've talked about. The volume isn't that's what these buyers are doing, and Tesla's at 3 or 4% market share here, and EVs are 7% of the market. That's taking a small slice. It's real numbers, so I'm not suggesting that that's not true, but it's a small slice. And when you think about your neighbor and do they really stick with the brand, and what do? Some do, some don't. And as you change lifestyle, if Tesla doesn't have a product that works for your lifestyle, then you're going to have to move on. One of the reasons that Chevrolet has a number of products. And another thing I would add though too is as you look at the way this comes out, you've seen Ford narrow down the segments it's going to participate in, and it's always really been strong as a Ford brand, and a little bit of Lincoln. Mercury didn't last forever. GM has always been a conglomeration of brands, and these companies in general are behaving with their history. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's challenges and dangers with that, because you have to figure out how to mold your history to the new realities of today. But if you try to do that by ignoring your history, you're going to fail. So GM has to take the approach that they're having in a lot of ways. The challenge is making sure that they can adapt to what today is while still being true to themselves. A person, a company, you never win if you try to not be yourself. You know that. So I feel like these companies are doing that, and it gives each one of them different set of challenges and different set of opportunities as they behave that way. But if they try to be mini Tesla, that's not a successful route for a company who's not Tesla.
All right, so let me throw this one out there, and then I know Greg's going to leave in a moment, so I want Greg to answer first, and then he can leave. Okay, so talking about General Motors, going back to its history, why didn't General Motors resurrect Saturn, and that would become its electric brand?
Well, that is definitely a curveball I didn't see coming. It's interesting because, if you talk about, if the past is never even past, it's interesting because GM in this case is the challenger. They're what Honda and Toyota were in the 1970s and 1980s. So to me, that's like a tremendous advantage. They can learn some of the mistakes they made, perhaps being like overconfident or, producing products that aged out and not serving different customers. At this point, they sort of know how to be not only like the king, but also the scrappy underdog, and perhaps how to fight that off. So I think in that case, that's where some of the, advantages can lie. As far as bringing back Saturn, I don't think that's the right place to go. Maybe also
Oldsmobile.
Delta 88, Rocket 88 with electric power. That sounds pretty good to me.
Well, bringing back the Hummer brand has been phenomenally successful, right?
Gary, can I take a shot at that?
Sure.
How about one word, dealers?
Mm.
You can't, if you're going to
Well,
do
okay,
that.
but we've heard Jim Farley basically say that in terms of going forward with their electric products, that they want to just say, Greg, that
Right.
Again, more of the direct to consumer model, using dealers as intermediaries rather than as the sales point. So maybe not a big problem.
If they're still using them for service, it's still a problem. And getting a dealer franchise agreement and then getting out of one is still a problem. I don't think dealers necessarily have to go away. I think that the direct to consumer kind of buying approach, and it's really about the buying. It's about the actual financing. I think there's a mix that ends up happening. And I think Brett's right. Dealers are certainly part of this equation.
And Stephanie, I don't want to imply that dealers are the problem.
No.
It's just the challenge in that model. I think dealers can serve a fabulous, important part of the business process. But
Yeah.
all of those Chevrolet dealers and GMC dealers and Cadillac dealers would look at that model that you described, Gary, and say, wait a second, where are we in this?
Well, all those dealers basically had a beef when they created the Saturn brand, right? And that suddenly became, the highest quality, highest level of consumer satisfaction of any General Motors brand. I mean, so that certainly has to say something.
There's definitely did you want to be skeptical? There's definitely a connection there, not so much about why Saturn could have or should have maybe been brought back, but many of you, both those of us here talking and listeners might be familiar with the name Chelsea Sexton, early EV advocate, very passionate, and she worked at Saturn for many years. And one of her main points was that one of the things OEM, writ large don't understand as much is that EV shoppers and EV fans are just like any other automotive fans. They love their tech, they love their car, they love the technology, whatever it is about, that someone loved about an old, Camaro from the 60s, they can also love about an EV in the 2020s, something about it that is inherent to, like, this speaks to me, this is cool, I want to show this off, I want to tinker with this, whatever. And okay, it doesn't have to be a Saturn car, but OEMs sort of looking at the bigger picture of making things that people will really be attracted to and want to show off. Like that goes back to the thing I was trying to say earlier, but I don't know, just because we're shifting powertrains and there is going to be this tumult, this pain until we get there. But the end result, I think, is going to be an industry, or at least a lot of drivers who are very similar to what we've had before, even as, we increase options for various mobilities and things like that. As these companies say they want to do.
All right. So we're going to go to my final advantage, because we've only got like 5 minutes left. I would suggest that Tesla also has a technology advantage over others. Okay. And what I mean by this is technology in terms of, the aforementioned Lucid has the, it has the top range, but it also has a very, very high price. Tesla's right up there in terms of range numbers, in terms of its battery technology. Then it's manufacturing technology. I mean, Brett, you referenced the Giga castings before. I mean, that is completely revolutionizing the way cars are being built and being manufactured. And so suddenly hundreds of stampings and weldments are giving way to these large castings. That's an advantage. And last but not least, they decided that their charging regime would be the North American, charging standard. They just called it the charging standard. They, made it up. I mean, we could call Autoline After Hours the standard of automotive program.
The Rolling Stones one time said, we're the greatest rock and roll band in the world, and they became that because they
so basically now we see virtually every OEM in the world say, yeah, we're going to go for that Tesla standard. We're signing on. We're going to be part of it. So again, I'm a consumer and I'm saying, wow, they're all signed on to this Tesla thing. They must be really good at making EVs. So technology advantage. You guys give me that one at least. I mean, you can give me the other two.
For charging, absolutely, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's mixed on charging, but I do think they have a technology advantage. And the reason I think it's mixed on charging is you've got so many automakers that have gone to the 800 volt that are going to something that the superchargers don't support. And Tesla's not really a fan of bidirectional charging. And you've got a number of automakers who have made that part and parcel of why you should buy their EV. So there's still some questions out there. But generally speaking, yes, Tesla has a technology advantage.
I would say it's as much an innovation advantage. They're more able, more willing to innovate and fail and succeed and move forward. And I think that's where this auto industry, and Gary, we've talked about this for years, this industry has historically, understandably with the investments, been very cautious. And that time in maybe some ways has passed. And we've been certainly go ahead.
So it's going to be interesting. I think part of that is investment, and I think frankly part of that ends up being, the cost when something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, the cost when something goes wrong has been massive, and various companies have been able to survive it. Tesla hasn't had it happen to them yet, but that sort of reckoning, it may never happen to Tesla, but that sort of reckoning in an organization, and to have some of them have it multiple times, is going to change the way that they think about things, and it kind of has to if you've got that many million cars out there.
I would suggest that the Cybertruck has been a things gone wrong situation. Now it may go right, maybe, but in the last 2 years, I think there's been a lot of things gone wrong on that. So yeah, they've failed, they've changed, they failed, but yeah, I think that ability and willingness is different. And part of it is they didn't have much to lose, and they had to do this. And part of it was they came from a different thought background. And how does this industry adapt or adopt that?
So Sebastian, you've been covering EVs longer than I think any of us other than you have. I mean,
it's been a while, yeah.
So I put to you, Stephanie talked about the comparatively low percentage of people who buy EVs. We're seeing the federal government like giving away money for people to buy these things. I think if they gave away money to buy Hemis, we'd all have chargers in our driveways. Right? So do you see market demand for EVs, or is this simply a Tesla phenomenon?
Oh, no, there's market demand. Of course there is. Is there as strong for a cheap just ICE that someone needs to get to work? There's not, since that product isn't as easily available, there's very little real demand for that because maybe people just look briefly and say it's not there. But the way I've always seen it is at the beginning, especially in the early days with there's so few things that, Tesla is fighting Nissan for a very small pie. And then if someone buys a Leaf, and not that these vehicles were directly competitive because the costs were so different, but they were still the only electric vehicles, right? So we would, when I was at Autoblog Green, compare Bolt or Chevy Volt and Nissan Leaf sales against each other. That doesn't make any sense now, but it made a lot of sense back then because those were that's what was available. So you looked at it. The pie has gotten bigger, and now you have more people who can reasonably consider, I might want a piece of that pie. The range is longer, the price has come down, whatever. It's been over as the industry's changed. That grows demand. And okay, sure, you made a point. There's 7% or whatever it is, or I'm sorry, Stephanie, I forgot the number of the overall market. Can we say that's huge demand? No, but it's higher than it was last year, and it's higher than it was the year before, and it's higher than it was before then. And if we're going to make predictions, I'll go out on a limb and say next year it'll be higher again. I don't think that's a bold statement in any way.
Yeah,
it's wild. So, that's just crazy.
Insane.
We're gonna mark this on the tape, exactly. And we're gonna come back to you.
Right. To me, that speaks to demand. Is the demand that I believe could and should exist? No, but there is demand. Yes.
Yeah, there is demand. And there is
all right. So I want to make a final point, and this will just completely throw away everything that I said about Tesla through this last hour, which struck me that yesterday ExxonMobil announced it is going to be paying $59.5 billion to buy a company that will provide it greater access to get oil from the Permian Basin, excuse me. Okay. So I say to myself, seems like ExxonMobil thinks there's a future in gasoline.
It's not dead yet. And you know, and oil is used for more than gasoline too. So like petroleum is something that we need, and you know, for other things too. So
I'm just sort of guessing the
oil
gasoline. The gas.
That's the bigger part. But still.
Yeah. I will go back to what I've said a lot recently: is 49.9% of consumers think gasoline is outdated. 51% think it is the future, and it's just a really tough consumer market right now. The politics are so deep and severe that even if you have the right answer, you're not able to get there because of the politics. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that in the next 11, 12, 13 months. We're going to see an enormous amount of that come back. And I think you're going to see, you know, I was on an airplane a while ago, and lady said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I do research on automotive vehicles, specifically electric vehicles." She unbuckled her seatbelt, got up, pointed at me, and started yelling at me, saying it was a communist plot to destroy America. And I kid you not, she got up and stood and pointed at me. Wow. I'm sorry. On the other side, you could probably say,
I would do that, but
yeah, you've done that to me. Actually, no, wait. But I think there are some real strong arguments that the gasoline combustion engine is still an important part of our future. How we make that transition and how fast is really up for question. I am not a proponent of either. I think electric vehicles are spectacular. I saw a truckload of Chevy Blazers going down the road a couple of days ago. I thought, wow, those are gorgeous. But I think there's a lot of people in this country that just aren't buying in and won't buy in, not because of the technology, but because of the politics.
All right, Sebastian, you get the last word.
That's an entirely separate discussion. I 100% agree with Brett that is a factor. Maybe the industry hasn't had to deal with to this degree. I mean, there's always been the hybrid, not always. There's been the hybrid versus gas guzzler sort of discussion since the Prius and the Insight and everything came out. But this removing your car, which car you buy, making it so much connected to some sort of political outlook. That's unfortunate, fascinating, and we can talk about that a different time.
All right, so we got to wrap this up, Brett.
Sorry.
So Sebastian, you said we'll talk about this at a different time. We will do another one of these shows. I think it was a lot of fun. So Stephanie Brinley, thank you for joining us. Brett Smith, Sebastian Blanco. I've had a blast, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And I hope you in the audience enjoyed it as well. So thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
If you like this program and would like to learn more about the automotive industry, check out our website at autoline.tv or look for us on YouTube on the AutoLine channel.